Good morning. I would like to call this meeting to order. Thank you for joining us during our weekly virtual Irs breakfast meeting. My name is Pauline Lam of Cotai Realty. A few housekeeping tips. All participants will be muted, and should you have a question or a comment, please enter it into the chat box. The host will read it during the Q&A section of the meeting. Please remember to join us weekly, as we will have our virtual Irs breakfast meeting every Thursday at 9 a.m. As always, this meeting is being recorded and will be available online on our YouTube channel, West and Gabriel Valley Realtors. A little about me. My name is Pauline Lam. I'm your main Irs monthly program chair. Please remember to follow WSGVR social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also watch all our pre-recorded video on YouTube. WSGVR now offers text message updates. Please text WSGVAR to the number 313131. Today's agenda consists of our President's message given by our President, 2020 President Mindy Ye, and followed by guest speakers, Michael Brooks and Angela Lee from Direct. Here's the Mindy giving her President's message. Mindy.
Thank you, Pauline. Good morning, WSGVR family and guests. I'm Mindy Ye, your 2020 President. I'm truly grateful to be here with all of you this morning. Please remember to always to be good to yourself and spend quality time with you and your loved ones, and cherish every moment. Thank you for attending our virtual MLS breakfast meeting and for your continued support as a valuable member of the West San Gabriel Valley Realtors. Our leadership team and staff are a phone call away. I would also like to thank our guest speakers today, Michael Brooks and Angela Lee, with tax attorney with Direct. Some updates I'd like to share with you. Some relief from penalties for delinquent property tax on May 6th, following repeated requests by Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. Governor Newsom issued exclusive order N-61-20, which direct county tax collectors to waive tax penalties, late tax penalties, and interest charges for taxpayers who were unable to pay the second installment of annual property tax due on April 10, due to economic hardship resulting from the COVID-19 emergencies. Relief from penalties available to owners of residential property occupied by taxpayers and a small business operating on property owned by business owners. For more information on how to apply for relief from penalties and to find out if your county offers the options for installment payments, please contact your county treasurer tax collectors. I'll be typing the Los Angeles County and Riverside County information later in the Zoom chat if you guys prefer. Per CAR, a fully severely of COVID-19 outbreak on economic and housing market has yet to be fully tolerated. And even as economy begins to reopen and several key indicators suggest hopefully signs that the bottom is within sight. The forward-looking indicators suggest that the road to recovery will be bumpy and punctuated by fitted and started as activities in segments of economy are faced in over times. Many industries will face ongoing restrictions beyond the shelter in place, and the toll on labor market will continue ripples through consumer spending and economic growth. Economic begins to reopen in California. Governor Newsom has ordered gradually reopening of California and economic beginning May 5th. Selected retailers with curbside pickup options will be allowed to reopen. Built-in shop is still not permitted. In addition, some industries will with proper distance between workers, protective gears, and sanitizing equipment will also be able to open, including logistics, manufacturing, and constructions. However, many businesses will remain closed, including offices and gyms, and other restricted remains in effect in majority cities. Members seeking effective base vary slightly in weekly survey. Although the percentage of realtors experiencing buyers withdrawing offers and sellers removing their homes from the market remains elevated, the numbers have been declining modestly for the past 3 weeks. Between May 8 and May 11, 39% realtors reported having a buyer withdraw an offer on a home that they had been ready to purchase, down from the peak 48% 4 weeks prior. Similarly, the percentage of realtors that have had a seller remove a listing from MLS was down to 52% over the weekend from peak of 57 4 weeks earlier. Market data shows ongoing improvements but remains depressed. After drop by between 40 to 60% after the SIP order were issued in California, both new listings and the numbers of listings entering the escrow process have stabilized in recent weeks. In fact, pending sales have increased for 5 consecutive weeks through May 8, and new listings experienced their fourth consecutive increase last year. This is a positive sign that the housing market is nearing bottom, but levels remain depressed relatively and lev- precise levels, particularly in the listing categories. So an eventual uptick is still expected to be gradually, even when we begin to move in the right directions. Our housing indicator shows signs of life, but no time to celebrate. Long-term benefits of housing still intact and may have improved due to COVID-19. 20 million jobs lost as unemployment shoots to Great Depression levels. Most jobs lost in sectors with persistent impact expected. Economy expects to shrink by 30% for Q2, which is painful. That's all I have for today, and I hope you continue practice the social distance, stay healthy, stay strong, and stay engaged. Please join us next Thursday, May 21st at 9 a.m. Our guest speaker will be Megan Barbara with CRMLS. Topic will be on clear corporation policy. Additional information will be available by the end of this week. Thank you, Pauline, and everyone.
Thank you, Mindy. Now, it's my great honor to introduce you our guest speakers today, Mr. Michael Brooks and Angela Lee from Direct. Michael Brooks is an over 20-year licensed tax attorney and the president of domestic and international real estate closing tax services, Direct, an Arcadia-based firm which assists non-U.S. persons with the tax implications of selling and renting out U.S. real estate. Michael has spent his career working in the area of international taxation, including how the Irs taxes non-U.S. persons who enter into U.S. real estate transactions. Michael is a regular lecturer throughout the state of California on the issue of mandatory federal tax withholding on sales of U.S. real estate. Ms. Angela Lee. Angela served as the tax director of Chinese affairs from Direct. Born and raised in China, Angela has lived and worked in the United States since 2009 and received her MBA from USC. Angela worked several years with Chinese company in the US and more recently with US company with a large Chinese client base. Let's give our warm welcome to Michael. Here's Michael.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear me. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for that lovely introduction that we wrote. So thank you for that. And it's great to have everybody on board in this new era. It is listening to Mindy's preliminary overview. There's some sobering stuff out there, and it's gosh, what a crazy time. I know that I feel, and Angela feels, and everybody feels out there right now. So we're all doing the best we can, and I hope everybody's doing okay. I hope this lasts as short as possible. Don't know what else to say. It's an unbelievable time we're living in. Anyway, I'm a tax attorney. DIRECTS, by the way, stands for Domestic and International Real Estate Closing Tax Services, as you can see on your screen. So what we're going to do today is give you the perspective that we see of the international market from a couple of people who see a lot of real estate transactions every day from foreign people. Obviously, we focus on foreign sellers, but believe me, a lot of the foreign sellers are selling to foreign buyers. And so we can talk to a lot of foreign individuals and get their perspective on what's going on and their appetite for further investment, or are they looking to dump what they have? What is the feeling like out there? We'll give you what we see from the ground. And also I'm going to go over some news events that have taken place over the last couple of months that you could share with your foreign clients to make you look like you've got some inside information and may set you apart from some of the other realtors. Hopefully it does, because you won't hear what I'm going to say everywhere, and it's good to know about all the angles. I think when it comes to foreign investors, it's a competitive market out there, and the more you know about all the issues they might face, the better you're going to look. So with that, why don't we jump to the next slide there, and we will go over the first part of this discussion is the sort of technical problems that have arisen in the age of lockdowns and countries being isolated, and everybody knows what's going on around the world. What has that meant functionally when it comes to closing real estate? In the second part, we'll talk about trends and viewpoints we've heard from our clients. The first part, I'm going to just talk about technical issues that have arisen that you can share with your clients, or that you should just be aware of when you're entering into a transaction, so you know what to expect. Okay, the first one, notary problems. Now, again, I am presupposing for the moment that you are dealing with a foreign client who is in all likelihood not here right now, right? Everybody's sort of back in their home countries, can't go anywhere for the most part. So if you are, for example, helping a foreign person who owns real estate here and they're selling their real estate, what are the unusual hurdles they're going to have to prepare themselves for that are a little atypical from the time, for the times. All right, the first one, notarization problems. Everybody knows, or should know, that if you're not here in California to sign the deeds and have it notarized in person by a California notary, the traditional process is that you would take those notarized documents and go to the U.S. Embassy in the foreign country that you're in, and the U.S. Embassy sort of serves as a notary, and that's how these foreign deals are closed. Now, the past few months, the embassies, like everything else, have been a mess. And depending on what country you're talking about, and depending on where you were, where the foreign person was when they were trying to complete the transaction, indicated whether the embassy was available or not. So for example, in February, if you were a Chinese person trying to close a real estate deal here, there's no way in heck you were going to use a U.S. embassy. They weren't open, or they certainly weren't open for this, notarization purposes. They might have been open for some emergency services, but nothing like what you would have needed, for your client would have needed to close the deal. That has changed in China as we talk. And actually, the latest, from what I can tell, all the embassies there are open now. But of course, the same cannot be said, or at least in much more limited fashion in many parts of the rest of the world. We had a client the other day closing a transaction in India. I mean, first of all, the guy couldn't even leave his house anyway, regardless. There were people outside the house making sure that he wasn't allowed to leave for any reason. And even if he could, the US Embassy wasn't taking people to come in and have deeds notarized. So depending on the country, the past few months, one problem people have had in closing deals is that the embassy certainly wasn't available to them, or maybe they were under lockdown conditions, you name it. So, and they obviously weren't here to have their deeds notarized. There's also this fallback possibility, which I think is equally as impractical these past few weeks and months, that you could use a local notary and they could go before the court system there, the apostille or what have you. Heard different names for this. That also has been off the table in many countries because their court systems weren't working. Forget that. So what has happened in the industry to get around this problem of how do we close these deals? Let's go to the next slide, please, because it's sort of interesting. So what's happened, guys, is to me, it's very interesting because California has this sort of rigid, we're not going to allow video notarization. It's not going to count. You're not going to be able, notaries, to get on a video chat with somebody in another country or somewhere else. And, then you're going to sign the doc, and they're going to sign the doc, you're going to witness the doc that they sign, and we're going to accept it. That is not the law in California. It probably should be at this point, especially under the emergency conditions we're in. But in speaking with many escrows, I talk to escrow companies all day, there's a trend that has emerged, which has allowed for deals to close by using notaries in other states. Virginia apparently is now a very popular state for whatever reason, to call up, there's some notaries there who are specifically dealing with international clientele. And as best as I can tell, what's happening, guys, is the notary is getting, I'm having a video, video chat with the video notarization with the foreign seller in the foreign country. Foreign seller is signing the docs in ink. The notary is signing the docs in ink. Nothing's done electronically. So everybody's signing in ink. They're both mailing it back to escrow. The documents, if you were to look at them, don't indicate that this is all taking place via notary. They just look like it would have been, if you looked at the documents on their face, they appear to look just like everything was done in person. The title companies, I don't want to say they're looking the other way, but they're not asking too many questions. I don't think they want to know too much, to be honest. Both the signed document from overseas and the signed document from the notary are reaching the escrow, passes it on to the title, and it's all sort of working. So the workaround of my embassy is not open, or I can't leave the house because of whatever country I'm in, is to use a notary from another state. There are notaries who are absolutely taking advantage of this for their business purposes. Virginia, the state of Washington apparently has become big into this when it comes to Canadian sellers. Your escrow companies, my hunch is, if you don't know yourself, your escrow company probably should be up on this, and I would use them as a resource, maybe let them guide you. So don't let the fact that your client is in a country where the US Embassy is not open, or they're on lockdown and can't leave, although for the most part that's being lifted right now, stop you from closing a deal. Even though we don't allow video notaries in California, I can just tell you the trends and ear to the street, it's being worked around by using notaries from other states, and that is helping close the transaction. So that's one problem I've seen, and how it's being overcome just anecdotally by talking to many escrows and so forth. Don't let that stop you from closing a deal. Number 2, mailing problems. Now this also is improving of late, but holy smokes, was this a problem for a while. You could be waiting as an agent, dying to get the notaries, for example, the signed deeds, for example, back from China or back from India, in a case I'm working on right now. You could have called FedEx, DHL, you name it, and if you got that thing in 3 weeks, you were lucky. So the mail around the world depending on the country you are talking about, is absolutely like no longer a certainty. And things have improved from China. We used to think it was 2 or 3 weeks. Now we've seen things kind of going back to the regular 2 or 3 day timetable. But again, just on this one client we have right now from India, he called FedEx, he called DHL. They told him, don't count on anything faster than 3 weeks. So based on the country and the client, they are going to probably have to check if you're dealing with somebody overseas with, you know, the local, and you can't use other, in our experience, you got to use FedEx or DHL. Don't ever use them, in my opinion, a local equivalent to FedEx to DHL. We've had many problems. They may be good companies, but it just doesn't work. You need one of these sort of, you know, gold standards, but even they have had major troubles on this during these crazy times getting the mail back to the United States where it has to be recorded, and that's caused a major inconvenience for realtors. So your foreign clients have to check with the local FedEx and DHL, etc., and say, hey guys, how long is this going to take realistically to get back to the United States? It could still take weeks depending on the country you're talking about. Again, China has improved lately. Before it was taking weeks. Now we're back to sort of a more regular schedule with that country, which we do a lot of business with, which is good. But keep an eye on the mail and don't count on it being the usual 2 or 3 days from international destinations. It's just not. So FYI. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. Okay. Now, here's the area, of course, that we will focus on a lot, that I've just seen a ton of problems in. And again, it's a side issue, but it's going to make you look good if you're dealing with foreign individuals, although maybe they don't want to hear it. But I think the more you can educate them, the more, you know, sort of well-rounded you sound as a realtor. So I don't think there's any point in hiding this fact, but I think it's, you know, it's good to at least let them know you can discuss it. IRS problems are bad this year. Let me just start from this premise. The IRS guys work in, from what I've been described, you know, meatpacking like offices where they are stuffed into, you know, tiny offices, tiny cubicles, and they have a lot of paperwork. You know, they're on top of their fellow employees. They have a lot of paperwork to go through. And of course, the IRS, by the way, employs about 75,000 people in the United States. You may not know that. And they've got about 10 major offices around the country. What happened was, in March, you know, the whole country kind of shut down. We all know that. And virus cases began popping up in any office, any large office in the country might have had them. And so the IRS got nervous, like any other big employer, and said, you know what, guys, let's get most people. They didn't get everybody out, but they got a lot of the 75,000. They sent them out of their offices back home. Now, they tried to set up a situation where at least half of those guys were going to do whatever job they were doing, you know, as effectively as they could from home. But frankly, half of them, their job really couldn't be done from home. And that second half was just sent home full pay and just said, stay tight. We're going to let you know when it's when you can come back. But for the moment, you guys are just going to get paid, and we'll let you know when you can come back. And the rest of the guys, some stayed in the offices, a few, although you couldn't call, for example, the IRS last couple of months. You can now, again, on some select lines, but for the last couple of months, you couldn't. And, you know, some worked from home and some just didn't work and got paid. Then in late April, the IRS realized we have some problems. And specifically, I'll point to 2 areas. You know, first of all, they had to get guys all these stimulus checks out. That was obviously a big deal for them. And they didn't have the manpower in the office to process these stimulus checks. And secondly, the area we deal in, and that is large refunds of any taxpayer, U.S. or foreign, could have a refund to get. But of course, foreign taxpayers are really looking for large refunds, because we all know, anybody who's heard my lectures before knows that foreign sellers are subject to this 15% of the gross sale withholding tax. you know, there's no way they're going to owe that unless they quadrupled the value of their property while they owed it. They're all owed, frankly, huge refunds. Those refunds have to be done via paper filings. None of that stuff. They have to get ITINs, everybody. They, you know, a lot of them are trying to even do, if you know our area, what are called 8288Bs, withholding certificates, trying to avoid sending it into the IRS altogether and having a IRS officer look at the transaction and say, oh yeah, you guys, you maybe don't owe us any tax. We'll let you not have to send it in, but it sits at the escrow company for 4 months or so while that's reviewed. All of that work that we do so much of can only be done in the IRS offices. Well, I'm going to tell you, our office, Directs, has not received mail from the IRS in 4 weeks. We haven't seen anything back from them. And that for us is astounding. That never happens. And what that tells me is they have basically stopped processing tax returns for our foreign clients, unless, you know, not talking about electronic ones that computers could do, but ours are paper. They have to match up a lot of paperwork. They've stopped processing 8288Bs, so our clients can't get these early withholding certificates, and they've stopped processing ITINs. All that stuff has to be done in offices, and the people that do that have not been in those offices, and so they none of that has worked while this shutdown has been in effect. So the IRS, for my purposes, is frozen. And that's a scary thing because the backlog just gets backer and backer. And so for your clients, I know you're saying, well, what does this have to do with us? I would say any foreign client who sold last year and has, you know, we have hundreds, and has contacted us and said, hey, do us a favor, do our tax return and get us, you know, our they sold for $1 million, get us our $150,000 back. And they're waiting. And I have some guys who are just going nuts about this because they need the money, frankly. I don't even know when they're going to get it. I mean, normally they might get it in June or something of the year after. So now I think they're going to get it in December. I even think 2021 is starting to become a possibility. I just can't even quantify how far this backlog is because these guys have not been in the office. The mail has piled up. You can read articles about how nobody was in the offices, not even for regular work, domestic work, for the last 2 months. And so there's descriptions of mail piling up in, quote, trailers outside the IRS offices where somebody had to go back and go look at that mail. And, you know, the guys that look at the mail don't know anything. So they have a huge pile. Now, what happened most recently was in the end of April, the IRS said, hey, we got to get some guys back in here. This is getting out of control. And they offered, they know nobody wants to go back in. The IRS employees are scared, frankly, because there have been some virus cases in IRS offices. About 100 people have gotten sick. And now we don't know if it's from the office or separately, but about 100, last check, 100 IRS officers have the virus and about 4 have died. So what they did is they said, hey, we need some guys back in here. Now, they didn't order them. These are unionized workers mostly. This is a touchy issue. They didn't order them in. They said they ordered them in, but it really wasn't an order. They tried to dangle 10% to 25% pay bumps to get these guys back in the office. Because again, a lot of this work really has to be done in the office, including answering the phones, and including doing the paper returns and all the work we do. And then I read the most recent summary was, you know, they asked about 10,000 guys who were out to come back in, and they offered them pay bumps and so. And apparently, a lot of people said no. So a lot of the employees declined that polite invitation and are still at home. Many, again, are getting paid fully and not working, which, as you can imagine, is sort of a tricky scenario now. And I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I think at some point we have such a backlog that if the IRS doesn't order these guys, you know, I hate to say it, at the threat, and I don't even know if they're allowed to do this, because again, this is a unionized workforce. Who knows what the rules are? But at some point, you know, the IRS employees who are already getting paid are not incentivized that much by a little pay bump, and they're a little nervous about the conditions in these offices. We all are. it may come to the point where the IRS commissioner orders these people in, and I don't know if they're allowed to fire them if they don't accept it or not. This is not a private business. This is not Elon Musk here. And we may, again, they've asked politely once again for more, quote, volunteers, and we'll see what happens. But I can just tell you, because I deal with these guys every day, they are very backed up. Your clients, your foreign clients who are looking for, correspondence and refunds, and it's going to be a big headache for me. I'm already getting people sort of pleading with me, where's my money, as if I can control it. I'm like, I have to forward them some of these news clippings because it's really just a bad situation. So I don't want to go, I already have gone overboard, but I can tell you things are bad at the IRS, and I don't know how they improve until the IRS either really comes down hard, I hate to say it, on the employees and forces them in, or gives them fantastic financial deals that they just decide are worth it. But if they're going to get paid and they can stay at home, which is sort of the deal right now for many of them, I don't know. It's not a normal business, and it could be a mess. So foreign individuals from last year, any individual who sent in a paper tax return, you're going to be waiting a while. I don't know when you're going to get it. It definitely could be at the end of 2020, could be 2021. Foreign sellers looking for ITINs. We do ITINs every day, way backed up, 8288Bs, withholding certificates. That's our thing, everybody. Let's avoid sending it in altogether. Let escrow hold it. Sometimes they'll help. Some good ones will help us with that. Usually 4 months now, who knows? 8 months, I just don't know. I mean, if they're not processing, it's impossible to say. Foreign individuals are going to have IRS headaches like everybody who send in paperwork, not e-filings to the IRS, FYI. Okay, let's move then. That's sort of the headachy part of what we really see. Let's move to the next slide, please. Okay. So now I want to switch gears. That's a tech roundup, it's sort of incidental issues. I hope you can use them in your business. I think it's good to know what's going on the ground. But we thought we'd also sort of switch gears and we're not real estate experts, we're not real estate consultants, and yet we see the real estate market every day. We talk to so many people. Angela's from China. She talks to so many people from China. So I thought we'd give you sort of our perspective on what the best we can. You'll hear a million opinions on this, so this is just two people's opinions, but we do talk to a lot of people every day on what the mindset is here from the foreign investor, both with respect to buying and selling. We're in extraordinary circumstances, we all know that. What are we seeing? I'm going to turn it over to Angela for the Chinese element, and then I'll come back and talk about some of the other countries we deal with a lot and give you my perspectives. But let me switch it over to the brilliant Angela Lee, who's going to give you the Chinese perspective that we see every day with our clients. So I'll let her just jump in this chair here. 1 second.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. And I have been communicating with the Chinese sellers, buyers, and also the Chinese investors who own the US properties, renting out to collect the rental income, and more investors who are looking for invest in the California real estate every day. And I just want to give you a brief overview. What's the mindset of potential Chinese investors in California real estate during this pandemic? China's COVID-19 lockdown is over. This virus swept through China quickly and now is largely gone. Businesses remain cautious, but almost all offices, factories, schools, and retail stores have reopened. During the Labor Day holiday that ran from the May 1st to May 5th this year, China recorded have 150 million tourist trips domestically. More than 4,000 major tourist sites are open, and the visitors bring a revenue of 6.79 billion. That's around like a 55% drop from the recorded from the last year's Labor Day holiday travel, but the consumer survey shows that confidence in domestic travel rose by 60% over the past 2 weeks. We see the Chinese population, especially the Chinese investors who are investing in the US real estate, remaining confident in their financial situation. Many of our investors who have government job stability, and both them and their parents have generous pensions, their age group ranging from 30s to 40s. They also largely have only 1 or 2 children, and this provides the confidence and the relative financial stability. We haven't seen a rush by the Chinese investors to sell their properties in California, and we think long-term, perhaps after 2020, the Chinese investors will remain strongly interested in California real estate. Short-term challenges still exist, and also based on how quickly we can put this virus in control. And also the travel restrictions still challenges. Let's move to the next slide, please. I want to talk the number 2 and the number 4 together, and then we will go back to the number 3. And everyone knows the capital outflow restrictions by the Chinese government affect the Chinese investors in the past 2 years, makes them couldn't bring the cash to the US, and some of them are forced to just purchase the house by the mortgage loans, and although they pay higher down payment, and then they still take loans, and we see the current lower mortgage interest rate in the US might attract more Chinese buyers later in 2020 and 2021. We also see a spike in Chinese investor to Chinese investor transactions. That means buyers and sellers are both Chinese, and they only pay the commissions, fees, and the IRS 15% withholding tax. California withholding tax 3.33%. So roughly around like 25% would require US dollars, and they can pay the remaining amount in Chinese yuan in China. And for number 3, although currently the home prices, we haven't seen a significant drop in home prices, but we might see along the way, maybe the later 2010 to 2021, the panic selling, which may signal a green light to the Chinese investors who have cash and looking for bargains in the United States. Everyone knows after 2008 financial crisis, and between 2010 and 2015, the Chinese buyers put more than 17 billion into the US commercial real estate, and they have become the largest foreign buyers of the US properties. And the e-commerce business is also booming in China, especially after the pandemic. More and more people have to engage in the virtual economy. Some of our clients from China told us they don't mind to purchase the US real estate through the virtual open house tours for safety reasons, and also if they see a bargain, they see the panic selling, and the investors will consider this is a good opportunity for them to reinvest in the United States, just similar we have seen in after 2008. So during the lockdown in February and March, we have seen a lot of Chinese students went back to China, and then there might be a spike in selling from the Chinese parents who own the US properties before they bought those properties for the children to go to the college. But right now, there is unknown like when these kids can go to the college. It might not be fall 2020, or might not be even in spring 2021. So in the very short term, we might see these Chinese parents want to sell their properties. And although the Chinese embassies, US embassies in China have been opened, but we still see the Chinese citizens are sometimes reluctant to travel to visit the US Embassy for dating and passport certification. And because these people's home, they live pretty far from the US embassies, which they have to take a train or even fly to go to those embassies. They still feel a little concerned, and but they have to obtain the items when they sell the US property. Those items, which called the individual tax identification number, is super important because without the item, the large amount of withholding tax, 15% from the IRS, 3.33% from California, they would never get it back if they didn't obtain the items successfully at the time of close. So they need some guidelines here from the realtor, escrow, or some very experienced tax companies such as Directs, and we can help these clients if they are not convenient to travel to the US Embassy, since Directs is the IRS authorized passport certifying agents, which allow us to help these clients to certify their passport in order for us to help them obtain an item. Now I'm just gonna hand over to Michael to talk about the Canadian investors and also the investors from the rest of the world. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Let's go to the last slide there. Yes, we deal with a lot of Canadians too. Everybody who deals with the international market should know that Canada and China are 1-2. Lately, it's been China, Canada, in terms of investment into the United States, but before 2008, it was always Canada #1. I don't know what's going to happen to Canada. I think they've had their problems if you watch the news with the virus themselves, and their economy is not doing so hot. On the other hand, the people that the Canadians that buy property in California are usually buying them to get out of the Canadian winters. And that's, the winters aren't going to change. We haven't seen a rush to the exits from the Canadians. I don't know, frankly. It's really interesting if you follow the news. I'm not sure, that right now the border is blocked between the United States and Canada, except for what they call essential work. And, whether it's going to open anytime soon, or I've even seen some projections that in essence, the border may be locked, through into the next year, which would really be for some of the resort areas and where the Canadians buy the real estate to get out of the winter. That could really be a problem for business if they can't even come next season. They were rushed out of the United States in March when their own country said, get back here or you're not going to be able to get back in. They all had to pick up and get out fast. Again, crazy time. I think in general, I would say I don't think there should be major changes, because the fundamental conditions about why Canadians buy real estate here, i.e. the weather, are not going to change. And they like California a lot, by the way. They view it as a higher, a nicer state than Arizona, which is the big competition for Western Canadians. It's California versus Arizona in terms of where to have their winter house. And I think Arizona is viewed as a sort of a step down from California. So we get a lot of the more higher end Canadians buying in the Southern California regions. Obviously, they're looking for the warmer areas because they're usually down here from, November, potentially through March or April. I don't think they're going to change very much over the long haul. I really don't. And then finally, the rest of the world, about a quarter of or a third of our clients are from who knows where, anywhere in the world. We deal with, you name it, we've seen the country, and we can all follow the news. I mean, I'm not anticipating a lot of Italian investors in the next year or so, based on how difficult it's been for them there. Europe in general, if you're from Europe, you can't come here right now. We have basically, the United States is basically blocking anybody from Europe from entering the country to start with. And a lot of those economies have been hit hard. So, maybe, Europeans are looking to sell. I don't know. We haven't seen so much because of the financial difficulties. I can tell you, I got a couple Europeans who are sending me daily, emails about where's my refund, which I wish they'd give me a break, but because they're definitely under some financial strain there. On the other hand, there may be new, greater opportunities to sell real estate to people from, cash, I think, is going to be king pretty soon. And I think you can see, if you watch the news, some countries have dealt with this scenario really well. And I've mentioned them there on the bottom: South Korea, Singapore, Australia. We have had significant investors from both Singapore and Australia, a couple even from South Korea, and they may well, to the extent that they have extra cash, become more interested than ever in the future in US/California real estate. So if I was trying to, sort of strategize, I would look, I suppose, in the near term at the countries that have, from the buying side, that haven't been battered. And, on the selling side, you may frankly look at the countries that have taken some hits and assume, to the extent that you have some access to these pools, that they may be under some pressure to sell because of their financial challenges. And you see the news, Italy, Spain, those countries have been enormous pressure, UK. So we haven't yet, but we may see increased selling out of necessity from those countries. Okay, lastly, and then we'll take questions. Everybody knows, just a quick summary, what we do at Direct. We always encourage you to email us, and the email's at the bottom of these slides. And I have a bunch of newsletters I'll send you if you want, or put you on our list. We got newsletters about all the topics we talked about today. We send them out. I don't do it every month or anything. I just send it out when I think there's something worth chatting about. Michael at DIRECTSLLP.com. But just a reminder for those of you who haven't heard us talk before, what we do is help foreign investors in real estate with the tax obligations. They're selling the real estate. They're gonna have to put the 15% up front, even if they have a loss for the IRS. They're gonna get that back. It's usually a lot of money. We all know the foreign investors typically are dealing in larger transactions than the domestic investors on the whole. And so they're going to have to get their ITINs. They're going to want to, if they can avoid sending it into the IRS, which they can with some good escrows, and I know we have some good escrow people on this call, then they're going to want to do that, and that we help them with that, the 8288B process. And then, of course, we help them again with the next year getting the money back if it did have to go into the IRS, and or California, by the way. California also has a 3.3% withholding tax. We help them with all these issues. The caveat, of course, this year is the whole tax system's an absolute mess, and I don't know where it's going to end up. And so that gives me a little pause about our current situation, but that's our job in general. I hope that we are not sued out of business for lack of being able to get these poor people their refunds in the next few months, because it's going to be hard. So pity us a little bit. We're going to be under a lot of pressure to get these guys their money back. Oh yeah, we do. And one other thing, of course, is if their investors are renting their real estate, we also do they should be filing U.S. tax returns for that, and we help them with the rental obligations. We can send you PowerPoints, whatever you want. Just email me at Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, at directs, D-I-R-C-T-S, direct with an SLLP.com. Okay, that's the end of our sort of summary. Now I'm here to take whatever, and Angela as well, take whatever questions we may have. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael and Angela. I see the chat box at the moment so far. Since you're so clear, informative information, I don't see the question submitted, but I do see that Juliana too and Marcus Jacobs, and give us some additional information for escrow and notary. And I see that the last one, Agnes Ma say, Michael, I may have missed it. What is your reading of investors buying into California, specifically Arcadia now?
I mean, our reading at the moment is we don't know at the moment. I mean, I think in the short term, I have no idea. I think in the long term, we're bullish. When we're talking about international clients, domestically, I have no idea. Long term, we remain bullish, honestly, because again, our number one constituency is from China. we hang our hat on the fact that that economy is still pretty strong, and you know, they've got a great system where a lot of the people sort of have guaranteed income for life because of their government jobs. So I remain, I know there's some turbulence, but I remain bullish. And Arcadia, of course, is a heavily Chinese area. So I remain bullish, maybe not in the next few months because it's such a crazy time, but in general, I remain bullish because I think you're going to see if I had to guess, I think you're going to see a scenario that's not that different from maybe from the 2008. I hate to say it because it was a rough time, from the 2008 time, where I think you're going to see some bargain hunting maybe from cash. Now, again, they have their challenges getting the cash out, but there's a lot of ways to circumvent that problem. That there's a lot of creative ways, including Chinese to Chinese transactions, using loans. There's other creative ways I've heard about I won't go into. They seem to find a way when they need to. So, but Arcadia, I would say after the next few months, I would stay bullish. Maybe it takes the whole year. I don't know. I would stay bullish on heavily Chinese areas where there's already a good Chinese community established. I think you'll see more buying in the next 5 years for sure, you know, after this sort of settles down, because that country is going to be the one least scathed, I think, by the problems that we all have, and that's going to put them in a powerful position to buy real estate. And eventually these universities are going to get working again, and sort of the stuff that draws them here will still be here. So I would be long, you know, medium to long term, I would be bullish. Short term, I think it's so much turbulence, I have no idea in the next few months who does, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we have a next question from Tom Zhang. The question is, for Chinese to Chinese buyers, seller has to have at least 18.3% for the IRS and the state tax withhold.
Yeah, they're going to have, if you have a Chinese to Chinese buyer and you're thinking, oh great, I can avoid these capital outflow problems because you know, I can conduct this whole transaction basically in China and just tell the escrow company we did it all over there, don't worry about it. Yes, but no. There's still going to be, I think, at least 25% of the whole transaction, the gross sales price minimum, that's going to have to come in US dollars, and that is to account for, there's no way around the 15% withholding tax. There's no way around, well, there are a couple ways, but in general, there's no way around the 3.3 withholding tax. The realtor fees are going to have to get paid. The escrow fees are going to have to get paid. The natural hazard disclosure fees are going to have to get paid. I think you're going to have to assume, even in a Chinese to Chinese transaction, which has a lot of advantages because of the capital restrictions, capital outflow restrictions, you're still going to have to come up, the parties are still going to have to come up with a minimum, I would say 25% in US dollars to make it happen. Some portion of that transaction cannot take place in Chinese currency. But the rest could, and that's an advantage. So you could see a lot of, especially, we know that Chinese outflow restrictions were in place before the virus. That was, if you looked at the National Association of Realtors, I mean, I think China, there's a lot of reasons why China slowed down the last few years, but right at the top of the list is the Chinese government got serious about letting so much of their money out of the country. And so people have had to get creative, and certainly Chinese to Chinese, I think, is one way. Angela tells me they don't monitor, or at least they as well, this paying to, you know, large amounts to other Chinese citizens, but they do out of the country. So that's an opportunity to complete the transactions.
Thank you. Michael, there's another question from Juliana too regarding FERPA. The question is, if the investment is made under a U.S. domestic corporate entity, but the actual officers or members of the corporate entity are foreigners, does a withholding have to be done?
No, I mean, a U.S. company is a U.S. company. I don't care who the officers are. The only exception is a single member U.S. LLC generally is the only exception to that. So you can certainly have a U.S. corporation, a regular corporation, and everybody that's a member of the corporation could, all the officers could be foreign individuals. That is not a foreign seller. But there's a couple exceptions. The biggest exception to that rule is a lot of people use LLCs. They mistakenly use a single member LLC where the single member is foreign. That is a foreign company, but multi-member LLCs are considered US sellers, even if the multi-members are foreign. There's one exception to that. I don't want to go too crazy. That has to do with how they might prepare rental returns. So you could actually have a scenario in California, this is a California rule, it's very tricky, that says multi-member LLCs where all the members are foreign could still be deemed foreign depending on how they've done some rental returns in the past. That's a very unique scenario that I've seen a couple times. For the most part, a regular corporation, a regular C corporation, or an LLC with multi-members who are foreign, I basically don't care who the officers or the members are. Those are US sellers. They're not going to be subject to the FIRPTA requirements at the time of sale. They will be subject to withholding. People get confused about this. It's not that they're not subject to withholding. The withholding is supposed to take place on the distribution of the proceeds from US LLC back to the members in the home country, back to China. But of course, that doesn't take place under the bright lights of escrow. And who knows whether that really occurs. But it's not that it's an exception to withholding. It just happens at a different time that escrow is not there to sort of regulate. And any liability would be on the corporation for the LLC for not doing it. So it's not that withholding doesn't exist. It just occurs at a time after the sale if it's an LLC with foreign multiple members. But FIRPTA doesn't apply, which is nice. So I hope everybody follows that. Yes.
Yes. And Juliana also responds, you say, I did do a transaction that was Chinese to Chinese using renminbi. The buyer had to deposit a certain amount of US fund to pay commission, ETAL. It was a tough one to close for a number of reasons, biggest of which was trust in the transfer of the funds in China. We know that this would need a lot of skill for the transaction, for the international transaction, right, Michael?
Yeah, but that's a great story from Juliana, but it may have been a tough one, but that's great that it could close, and it shows you how you can get creative, and that's a great comment by Juliana, good story, because everybody's got to get creative now, and to the extent that that can be done, even if it's a challenge, I think that, to the extent that you have networks of Chinese, clients, that could be a way to get these things done. And maybe it's a challenge, I get that, but, not having to come up with 75% of the proceeds in US dollars is a plus, even if there are some other hurdles. So that's a great, thank you, Juliana, for that story.
Yeah, right now, I see another one. Diana Yan, my Chinese clients want to sell the property in California to buy one in New York. Can she do some kind of exchange, or there must be tax withholding on the selling of California property? Can you give some thought for that?
Sure. I mean, there's always, just because somebody is buying another property, I don't care if it's in California, I don't care if they're doing a like-kind exchange, doesn't mean that there's not going to have to be 15% or withholding at the time of sale. It doesn't mean they won't get it back either. Remember, the withholding is only temporary. So the fact that they're going to buy a replacement property, and this could be within a 1031 or not within a 1031 in California, doesn't change the fact that, unfortunately, I hear this question all the time, why do, I'm going to reinvest it right in 1031 or no, I'm going to reinvest it right away into a new property. Are they still going to make me put up 15% at the time? Yes. Yeah, they don't care. They want to know if you made a profit on the sale. The best way to get around that, or the quickest way, is to do the 8288B withholding certificate. So at least it doesn't take that long to get out, to get the money back. But the fact that, the foreign person is buying a new property in California or any other state is not going to change the withholding obligation in the first place. Either the IRS, because they're foreign, nor will it change the California. California doesn't have a rule that says, oh, you're buying a new California property, great, you can avoid withholding. They do have a rule in California, unlike the IRS, that says if you're entering into a 1031 exchange, will let you avoid the California withholding. But that a lot of times is undone by the fact that the foreign seller goes into the transaction and doesn't have an ITIN. Usually the ITINs don't come in, and we get ITINs around the clock because the ITIN process usually don't come in until after the closing. And you can't use that 1031 exception to California withholding if you don't have an ITIN at the closing. And so so what we see a lot of times, whether it's a 1031 or not, the foreign people are buying a new property. The new property's in California, the new property's not in California. Let's just say the new property's in California. Oh, great, we don't have to do at least the California withholding. Often not the case, because that is undone on the rules. If you looked at the California Form 593, you don't get that special exception if you don't have an ITIN or social security number by the closing, and most foreign sellers will not have an ITIN or social security number by the closing. They'll have it afterwards. That's just the way the rules apply.
Thank you, Michael. I see there's a question raised by Janet Chen. She's asking how much tax withholding for Canadian sellers selling their house in California.
Well, the general rule is 15. I mean, anybody wants our PowerPoint on this, just email me at michael@direxllp.com, and I will give you the basic PowerPoints. The IRS rules are the same. It doesn't matter what country you are from, if you are foreign. And by the way, just to clarify for everybody who hasn't heard my general speech, foreign means not a US citizen, and it also means not a person who, although not a US citizen, is living here full time. Both of those people are not considered foreign. Although in the latter category, you're still going to be considered foreign if you don't have an ITIN or a social as of the day of closing. But for any foreign seller, it's generally going to be 15% times the gross sales price has to be withheld. Now, there's a couple, I don't want to get too into the weeds for this discussion. It actually could be 10% if it's between 300,000 and $1 million. It depends. It's a weird rule in that area on whether the buyer, I don't know why it matters, but if the buyer is going to live in the property and it's $700,000, it's supposed to actually only be 10%. I don't know why. And there's actually an exception for under 300,000. And if the buyer is going to live in the property, it actually could be no withholding. So what you see is, and you see a lot of these in sort of the resorty areas, these $220,000 condos, in the little tennis complex, those can be done a lot of times without, a Canadian seller can sell and there can be no withholding because it's under this $300,000 threshold, and the buyer says, yeah, I'm planning to live there, then that's where we see no withholding. But I always say for just general presentations, expect a 15% IRS holdback, expect a 3.3% California holdback. All that stuff is probably going to come back in full or in large part. It's only temporary. It's only to make sure that if they had a huge profit that they really pay the taxes. The IRS cannot go chase down people in Tokyo to try to get their money. So they have to take this amount up front. A lot of countries do it this way. It's not so crazy. The problem is now, of course, the processing. They just can't get the darn, and I just see this mounting headache. I sort of feel it as I talk about it. The money getting back to the people from the 2019 sellers and the current ones now who are trying to avoid sending it in via the 8288B, you need a functioning, working IRS, and we don't have that right now, and that's a problem. So you're going to see a huge back.
Great. Michael, we will take last 3 questions. Okay, the first is from Wen Chen. The question is, if Chinese seller want to put their house on the market, we need wait for them to get tax ID first. It takes how long to get the tax ID, the item?
So, great question. The IRS is very fussy about, because of ID theft, and for a lot of reasons, they will only issue a tax ID when a applicant has a valid reason to issue. So a lot of people make an application, they might even do it correctly, although it's not easy, and they still won't get their tax ID because basically they haven't cited a reason for which the IRS will grant them one. Putting your house on the market is not a reason that the IRS thinks you need an ITIN. Here are the reasons why they'll issue you an ITIN. The most common one is, I'm a foreign person, I'm entering into a sale transaction, here is my sales contract, here's my closing documents, here's my form 8288 and 8288, those are the tax forms, here's a certified copy of my passport, which they're going to probably have to use us or go to the embassy to get, and that's a successful application. So usually the application cannot go in to answer the question until you're at the very end of escrow, which means they're not going to have the ITIN as of close. It doesn't mean that the transaction won't close. Most foreign seller transactions close, and the foreign seller does not have an ITIN at that point. It means the application can go in at the close, not before. You have to have a sales contract. You have to have a closing, closing documents from the escrow. You have to have some tax forms. You can't get it before. The only way, if you really wanted to strategize to have an ITIN before, and I do think it's good to have an ITIN before, by the way, is if you were renting it out, for example, and you were doing rental returns every year, that's a way to get an ITIN before the sale, because a tax return to report US income is also a reason for which the IRS would issue an ITIN. And so that's another reason. But in my experience, 80% of foreign sellers don't have an ITIN going into the sale. They certainly couldn't get one just because it was on the market, and they have to wait for us to apply at the very end of the closing to get the ITIN. It comes in about 8 weeks, typically after today, yesterday's 8 weeks is now 16 weeks, who knows? And, but they won't get it till after, generally speaking, unfortunately, until after the closing.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. There's another question regarding IRS delaying process ITIN. The question is from Tim Liu. Question: if IRS delay process ITIN after you help clients apply for it within 20 days after escrow closed, should escrow still require send withholding to IRS?
Okay, so look, let's be clear. Whether the seller has an ITIN, and again, they're not going to have an ITIN in most cases within 20 days, is absolutely irrelevant to the fact that that money has to go in. The money goes in all the time without the ITIN. Nobody should be waiting 20 days. They should be doing it on the day of closing. The ITIN in a good time is not coming in until 6 weeks after the close. So the IRS is very used to getting money, 15% withholding taxes sent in, and the seller has no ITIN because they weren't able to apply based on the system till the very close. So don't wait till an ITIN comes in to send in the 15%, or you're going to be looking at a huge penalty. Now you may say, well, wait a minute, then how exactly are these foreign people getting their money back if the tax goes in and they don't even have an ITIN? And it's a good question. What happens is the ITIN application itself has, again, part of the applicant, the reason that they require the sale is in the application goes a copy of the tax forms that went into the IRS, what are they called, the forms 8288 and 8288A, or the 8288B if we're doing the exception, a copy of the sales contract, a copy of the closing statement. These forms allow the IRS to track the money that's gone in without an ITIN to the ITIN that's issued in 6 or 8 weeks. And the people who don't, so everybody who's working in the escrow area, send that money in at the closing. Doesn't matter if they have an ITIN, don't worry about it. B, every foreign seller should be applying at closing. Don't blow that off, because if they don't do that at the closing and the money goes in, it won't have an ITIN, and they don't do this ITIN application with all the stuff that's tied to the closing, and they just say, well, I'll just get it back next year. What they're going to find is they're going to hire an accountant or somebody try to get it back. The accountant does a tax return, might even apply for an ITIN at that point. Remember, tax returns are a time you can't apply for ITINs and they'll give them. But what they will find is the IRS has no record of them having their tax. And so failure by the foreign seller to apply at the time of closing for the ITIN is going to lead to, a year delay extra for them to get their money back, if they ever get it back. I think, and I've talked about this before, a third, a quarter, never get the money back because they just don't know how the system should work. So anybody, a good realtor, should absolutely be advising these guys, and hopefully escrows are pushing them too. Even though you're not going to have the ITIN as of close, even though we can't send it on the tax forms, and we can't avoid the California withholding if you're doing an exchange, we still need you to apply, and we're doing it for your benefit, because if you don't apply now, good luck next year getting your money back, because the IRS is run, incredibly inefficiently, and it's a mess, guys, getting the money back. They need to apply for the ITINs just so we can help them get their money back next year or in the short term this year via the 828B. They need to be applying by the time of closing for their benefit, for everybody's benefit.
Thank you, Michael. Now we will take the last question. The same question regarding item. If foreigner has the item, can he do 1031 exchange?
Yeah, foreigner can do okay. So it's great that let's just be clear about this. It's great if somebody, a foreign person, let's say there's no confusion that they're not a U.S. citizen, they live abroad. It's great that they have an ITIN going into the sale. It's great. They may have a social security number. They might have worked here a couple of years, from a previous time and have a U.S. social security. Those two things are great. Number one, though neither an ITIN or a social security number changes the fact that they're foreign and they have to have 15% withholding at the time of sale. It does not mean, oh, I have an ITIN, great, I don't have to have withholding. No, what it does mean though is that at least they're not going to have trouble, some of the troubles the non-ITIN people have in getting the refund. It also means if they're doing a 1031 as per the question, although it will not spare them from the 15% IRS withholding because they're foreign, and it doesn't matter if they have an ITIN or not, it will spare them from the 3.3% California withholding if they have an ITIN or a social going into sale and they're doing a 1031. I certainly, if I'm foreign, am not trying to claim for California purposes, I'm selling my principal residence. I think that's very unlikely. You have a principal residence in California. If you're a foreign person, it could open up a big can of worms with the state. You could also, although I'll tell you what you could claim though, if you're a foreign person, which is quite valuable, is I have a net loss on the transaction. I don't want to pay anything to California. There is that opportunity, but that also requires an ITIN or a social as of the date of close. So that's where an ITIN or social would be valuable to a foreign person as well. They could get out of the California because they have a net loss. If they have a net loss on the transaction, a net loss will not get them out of the 15% withholding for the IRS. So ITINs are useful to get the money back. Sometimes helps get out of California withholding, does not get out of IRS withholding, but helps at least get orchestrated an easier process for the return of the money.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for your so detailed Q&A section. And so we want to thank you again, and thank you, and Angela, for this wonderful presentation. On behalf of the Western Gabriel Valley Realtors, we would like to thank Michael Brooks and Angela Lee again for your informative presentation. Thank you, everyone, for joining our meeting today. We hope to see you again. Next week, our guest speaker is Megan Barber. Topic is CRM's Clear Cooperation Policy. It's very important. Please support our affiliates with your incoming transaction. Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned. Stay safe, stay well. We will see you again.